Hello everyone, I am Dave Laveria and I welcome you to another episode of Chemistry Connections. First of all, I would like to say thank you for all those who have watched my first video, and especially to those who have shared them with their friends, and to those who like the video and subscribe to this channel. And for those of you who have not subscribed yet, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification button so that every time a new video will come, you will be notified immediately. I promise that every time you come and visit this channel and watch the videos here, you will be learning something of great importance, especially in relation to health, wellness, and fitness. In our last video presentation, we learned that when we are infected with viruses, our immune system will respond by producing free radicals. These free radicals will help our immune system stop or slow down the multiplication of viruses. But since these free radicals are not specific only to viruses, they can also damage parts of our cell like the proteins, the nucleic acids, the RNA and the DNA, and also the lipids, then it would harm our body if they are not neutralized immediately. In our presentation today, we will focus on how free radicals will damage the lipids. The reason why we focus on lipids is because the damage brought about by free radicals on lipids is the most significant damage that the free radicals can harm or can do to our cells, to our body. And so I have here sections of fatty acids. Okay, you notice they have double bonds. So this is unsaturated. Unsaturated because the free radicals will normally damage or attack the unsaturated fatty acids. They will attack the hydrogen of a carbon adjacent to the carbon that bears the double bond. See, there's a double bond here. So the free radical will remove this one, this hydrogen. So this is a free radical. It contains one unpaired electron. So this is very reactive. So when it meets with a section of the fatty acids, it will react with the hydrogen that is attached to the carbon adjacent to the carbon with double bond. So you notice the free radical is now stabilized. But then another problem is formed. Your fatty acid now becomes a free radical. And if they are occurring in the lungs is of course oxygenated. This free radical will meet with oxygen and it will react with the oxygen molecule. Remember, oxygen molecule is O2. So O2, two oxygen atoms. You see, it forms another radical. The name of this radical is hydroperoxy radical. This hydroperoxy radical, since they are very close in proximity to other unsaturated fatty acids in the cell membrane, this would in turn attack the hydrogen of a carbon adjacent to the carbon that bears a double bond. So this is what happens. This is already stabilized, but then the stabilization of this causes the making of another section of our fatty acid, a radical. So this is now a radical. The name of this stabilized fatty acid, this is now hydroxy peroxide. This is already stable. This is not a free radical anymore, but then there's a problem. Fatty acids are supposed to be nonpolar, but since you inserted oxygen in the structure, it destabilizes the nonpolarity of your fatty acid. What happens to the new radical? This will react with oxygen and becomes a hydroperoxy radical. This in turn will react with adjacent fatty acids. That becomes a radical, and this becomes like this, and so on. Chain reaction will continue. I'll be showing you another illustration. Say for example, this is our free radical, and all this are sections of unsaturated fatty acids or lipids in our cells, in our cell membrane. Okay, the free radical causes the fatty acid to become a radical. And that radical becomes stabilized because of oxygen, but then at the expense of the next fatty acid. At the expense of the next fatty acid, it becomes stable. Okay? And the chain reaction will just continue. And the process of chain reaction will just proceed, continue and continue. And so it must be stopped. The only way you can stop this is through the antioxidant. Let's try what happens if we have the antioxidant. Okay? This happens when it meets an antioxidant. You need a powerful antioxidant to stop the autooxidation or lipid peroxidation. In our cells, we have different types of antioxidants. We have the vitamin C, the glutathione, and I mentioned last time the vitamin E. I highlighted already the importance of vitamin C in my last video. Now I will highlight the importance of vitamin E. Vitamin E is important because vitamin E, being lipid soluble, can mix with lipids. It can interact with lipids. Unlike vitamin C, which is water soluble, it can hardly penetrate the lipid bilayer. So if your cells have an abundance of vitamin E, it can immediately stop the process of autooxidation of lipids and therefore stop the damaging effects of these free radicals. Remember, once lipids are damaged and becomes hydroperoxide, it cannot be reversed anymore. But for purposes of fun, allow me to reverse the process. Okay? So here, it can be simply reversed. But in your cell, once the membranes, the lipid bilayer of your membranes are already damaged, it can never be repaired. It can never be reversed. That process is, that autoxidation process is irreversible. So take note, you have to protect the integrity of the cell membrane by taking vitamin. Now let me discuss to you the implications of what we have just learned about autooxidation to COVID-19 infection. When the cells of your lungs are now in oxidative stress, because the amount of free radicals is much greater than the amount of antioxidants, then the lipids in your cells, especially the bilayer of your membranes, will now experience autooxidation and the integrity of your cell membrane is greatly jeopardized. If you notice, the title of this presentation has a word, thrombosis. Now we will go to that direction. What will lead to thrombosis or disseminated intravascular coagulation? Lately I read a journal which is very old because it was published 1974, 46 years ago. But as early as that time, they already knew when platelets undergo autooxidation, just like what we have seen here, they congregate, they form clots, they form coagulates. And this is what they found out. When they put vitamin E in the process, autooxidation is not observed, and therefore no coagulation of platelets. So vitamin E stops the autooxidation and therefore stops the coagulation of platelets. Another journal I read, it was published around 1997. And this time it's not platelets but red blood cells. They induce autooxidation by exposing the red blood cells to free radicals. And this is what happens. In the presence of free radicals, the red blood cells undergo autooxidation, and just like platelets, they also congregate. But when they added vitamin E to the mix, it prevented autooxidation. But eventually they found out, they noticed that the cell or the red blood cells still dies and undergo hemolysis. But then, when they added glucose to the mix, so you have the red blood cells, the free radicals, the vitamin E, then they added glucose, they found out that no autooxidation and no hemolysis among the red blood cells that they studied. So, by simply adding glucose, you stop the hemolysis. By adding vitamin E, you stop the autooxidation of the cell membrane. By adding glucose, you stop the hemolysis. You probably are asking by now, why glucose and why it stopped autooxidation? If you remember in my first presentation, glucose will be converted to glucose 6-phosphate in the cytosol of the cell, and the glucose 6-phosphate will be converted by glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase to NADPH, and the NADPH is responsible for waking up or regenerating the glutathione. So that's the only possible explanation, because glucose is not an antioxidant. In my first video, I told you that you need to rest, you need to sleep in order to produce NADPH. But there are actually cells in our body that does not require resting, that doesn't require sleeping, but they still produce NADPH. Number one, the liver. Because the liver is always exposed to toxins. They detoxify, and so they are always exposed to free radicals. And so they need the regenerating power of NADPH to awaken or to reduce the oxidized glutathione. Another, testes for males. There, whether you are asleep or whether you are awake, you are exercising, the pentose phosphate pathway is active in the testes. The reason for this is, I think, very obvious. So that even in severe viral infection, the DNA of your sperm will not be affected because of the presence of glutathione in that part of our body. For ladies, especially if you are nursing mother, the pentose phosphate pathway in the mammary gland is also active because you are producing nucleic acids, you are producing amino acids, and you are also producing fatty acids. And it must be free from autooxidation, and that is why pentose phosphate pathway is active in mammary gland. Another group of cells in which pentose phosphate pathway, the one that produces NADPH, is always active whether you're resting or not, are red blood cells. And that explains why adding glucose to the mix prevented the red blood cells from becoming oxidized and ultimately undergoing hemolysis. The reason? The glucose is converted to NADPH, and NADPH awakens or regenerate back the glutathione due to the action of these free radicals, and therefore prevented the destruction of your lipids. So this is what we learned today. In order to prevent autooxidation to take place in the cell membranes of your red blood cells, your platelets, and even the cells of your lungs, you need a good amount of vitamin E. And you need also a steady supply of glucose so that glutathione will be regenerated. The glutathione that are oxidized by those free radicals will be regenerated. So you need a good amount of glucose. And since lungs are not part of those cells that with active pentose phosphate pathway, you need to rest. You need to rest because your lungs need to undergo or to call the powers of pentose phosphate pathway so that the glutathione will be regenerated. Remember, platelets with damaged cell membrane becomes hyperactive. I read in one journal that becomes 10 times more active than normal platelets. This is particularly important to COVID patients because the damage brought about by the coagulation of your platelets and your red blood cells and the combination of platelets and red blood cells will bring damage to your lungs and to other parts of your body. That is why we heard of people dying of heart attack, even without suffering the symptoms of COVID-19, because this exacerbates the condition of atherosclerosis already that they have. And so, in order to prevent that, you need lots and lots of antioxidants. I read in the news that the new way to manage COVID-19 is by giving them aspirin or other anticoagulant drugs like warfarin. I think that is okay. Also heparin, they add heparin to their management. I believe this will really help because this is thromboprophylaxis. They would prevent thrombosis. But if you will focus on thrombosis and you will focus on the prevention of thrombosis by using aspirin, heparin, warfarin, you are actually focusing on the effects, okay? The effects of the free radicals, not the source or not the cause of this thrombosis. The cause is free radicals, and the cause is oxidative stress because of greatly reduced amount or greatly reduced number of antioxidants. So if you can solve that, you will never worry about thrombosis. So if you already have a heart problem, that is an added risk on your part because of the atherosclerosis and the other injuries in the blood vessels. That would be a site for thrombosis on your part. Diabetic patients is an added risk because diabetics are chronic producers of free radicals. So be careful. Those individuals with G6PD deficiency, you need lots and lots of vitamin E and vitamin C, or even glutathione precursor, the N-acetylcysteine that I mentioned in my last video. You need this during this time. If you incur or if you have the coronavirus, then be careful because G6PD deficiency is an added risk. So to recap, in order to prevent autoxidation, which is the most significant damage the free radicals can give to our body, you need vitamin E. To prevent your red blood cells or even platelets from dying, you need a steady supply of glucose so that the glutathione will be regenerated back. And of course, don't forget vitamin C because it works inside and outside the cell. Whereas glutathione only works inside the cell, vitamin C can work inside the cell and outside the cell. And it greatly reduces the amount of free radicals that will ultimately lead to lipid peroxidation. And aside from that, vitamin C can also prevent the formation of fibrosis in your lungs, as what I discussed in my last video. So remember, don't starve during this COVID-19 crisis. Eat healthy food and take plenty of rest. I hope you learned something of great importance today, and I know that you will be learning more in the subsequent videos that I will be making. So if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe now and turn on the notification button that you may be notified when another video comes. If you have questions, please don't fail to write them down in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them in my next video presentation. May God bless you. Take care everyone. Keep safe.